Welcome to our next session of journaling for stress relief and spiritual growth. Last week was about symbols and the focus on the spiral and circles, sort of. And I was asked how, and some different forms, and I was asked how I incorporate that in my work. So what I see in my journals, just starting with this page here, I have a spiral with a quote. This page here, playing with Labyrinth spiral mandala concepts, work by an artist here whose piece is at the center. This is a doodle that I did, sort of these snowflake sunburst sun symbols. I have a lot of circles that just happen in the backgrounds of pages, repeating forms and shapes. So archetypes, the female figure, right, comes up a lot. So here again, I have with the yoga shapes, these abstracted circle mandala forms. Another labyrinth. I know it's upside down, but archetypes, because I work in different directions. The stargazer figure is in almost every one of my sketchbooks. Here on this page, I have, again, a variation on the sun symbols with the gears that undulate and weave, right? These are just the natural way that I tend to compose. Not sure why I put that marker there. Again, coming back to circles coming out. These are just the way my natural mark making happens. There's my stargazer again. I think she's somewhere else in this book as well. This composition, very circular, very swirling. It's not a very, I could have done this floral as a more grid form. It could have been more triangular, but mine goes in these crazy spirals, right? Also with spirals, I tend, when I'm looking for patterns, they tend to be very circle form focused. This one has that spiral at the center, spirals. So they just sort of repeatedly come up. More dots, right? This page here, the pattern circles and spirals, the patterning within that spiral, again, very snowflakey spirals in there. The palm format. So a lot of that just happens. I do from time to time touch on the more geometric here, very, but my just sort of natural place that I go to happens to be more circular. So here's an example that would be more, again, geometric, working with collage on top of, looks like maybe acrylic and marker underneath there, and some kind of printmaking. Whether that was accidental or intentional, I couldn't tell you right now. So that is sort of where it happens, how it happens in my explorations. So just a few sketchbooks. And today we're going to focus on the Labyrinth as a patterning, as a mark making tool, but then as something that can be incorporated further. So this spread, and because it's a vertical, it doesn't all fit in, but this is a Labyrinth pattern that I based probably on the Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth. And then I used the lotus on the top half. And then these figures come from the Cleveland Museum of Art, from the tomb of Philip the Bold. They're marble sculptures that are in the museum that resonated with me in creating this particular labyrinth. One of the things that we can do with labyrinth is a finger labyrinth can be a form of meditation and spiritual practice. So this is actually a pocket labyrinth that I got. The artist who created it for the Artomatic, I think they're called Artomatic art vending machines. The one that I know where it's located is at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. And the artists create little miniature artworks that fit in essentially, like a small box size. And you pay $5 into the vending machine and pop, an artwork comes out. Really awesome way to support an artist, a great way for artists to get their work out. The one that called to me was these little ceramic porcelain finger labyrinths. And the artist has used sort of a winding path. And the idea is just following the labyrinth, following the path, using it as a way of thinking, meditating. You could pause in the path as you go. The difference between a maze and a labyrinth would be that the labyrinth is not intended to confuse or trick. You are not meant to be lost in a labyrinth. The labyrinth is a path, and it has one entrance and one exit. They are the same. So the way you go in is the way you come out. And the labyrinth is an ancient symbol, an ancient path. So this clearly very complex. The other one that I wanted to pull out and just highlight a moment was, I think, in this book here. Yeah, so, and there are lots of labyrinth organizations. So this one, again, a little more complex in this pattern making, but there are different ways to create them, and I'll be sharing today a way, but this was from a magazine that I found on how to create a labyrinth in a garden or in an outdoor space, right? I'll go a little bit of the how to enter into the labyrinth in a moment. So we're going to go into the journals, and my spiral from last time, make sure we're centered here, looks something like this at this point. I ended up with 5, and this was a sort of composition that as a page spoke to me to stop. So that's where I ended up leaving that page. Okay, so I think here. So for today, I am going to work in a couple of different materials, and I'm going to work in a reaching where's my regular? I don't see my regular micron. Okay. I guess we'll use this. All right, so it's a waterproof pen is what I'm looking for. So when you set up the labyrinth in here, most for this labyrinth, this simple labyrinth pattern that we're going to do, most of the labyrinth will be toward the top. So in starting, you want to set up toward the bottom third quarter of the page, perhaps. I'm going to play with some other tools on this, some other water-soluble tools. So the Crayola marker, this is a watercolor crayon, and I have some watercolor pencils that I'm going to play with. But I'm starting here with this. So calming breath to slow things down. And we're just going to start with a plus sign, vertical, and a horizontal. And I'm going to put 4 dots, 1 in each quadrant. And I was just looking for, I didn't mark the page. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So our first step is to connect the top of the plus to the first dot with a curved line, and I'm going to curve to the right and connect on there. And now any thickening of lines is an artistic choice. Could be that you wait till the end. It could be that you do that in the moment. That's up to you. So first one though is connecting the top to the first dot. Then I'm going to connect the dot to the next arm of the plus. And how far up I go determines how far up the top of the labyrinth will be, and sort of determines your shape as well, right? So the further upward I go, the more, and it's going to oval in that direction. So you can exaggerate the shape. It'll end up being a little bit like this. This one has, just check here real quick. This one has, I've added other things. There's actually in one of the videos in the stop motion, creating this image. There's stop motion of that. So this shape stayed pretty circular. So it also determines how much space you have to move your finger. So if this is going to be something that you use as a meditative practice, not just the drawing of it as a meditative act, but the actual labyrinth once it's done, you might consider how much space you want for your finger to be able to move through the path. So this might end up being a little exaggerated. I don't know yet. And then I'm going to connect this dot to this arm here. And then I'm connecting the last arm to the last dot, going all the way around. You could do this with a compass. I made a large walking labyrinth on drop cloths where I actually used a compass to measure out all of the arms of it so that it was more mathematically precise, which does have a meditative aspect to itself. So I'm just going to use this time to sort of stylize my lines a little because I like that teardrop that I started there. If you want to add to your lines with the permanent marker right now, and when I do labyrinths in my journals, they're different every single time. I usually use this seed pattern, and you can expand the seed pattern. It can be more complex. There are more. I will provide some links to other seed patterns if you're interested. I like this one for the simplicity of it. So I'm gonna, at this point, so on this labyrinth here, when I created this one, I was thinking about the concept of the spiraling growth with the viney leaf, and the labyrinth almost being a living, growing thing. I didn't mark any other ones, so I can't pull them out as examples. For this one, it's hot, and I'm thinking watery, cool. I'm thinking watercolor tools and materials. And so I'm gonna play with these wet materials, which for me lend themselves less to precise marks like the vines and more abstract mark making. So this might be where you take this page, and if you're drawn to a more geometric symbol compositional style, your space that grows around it may be more geometric. If you're thinking more square, which is, you know, or you're thinking triangle. If you're more of a circle and spiral, you may go that direction. How you decide to connect the background with the labyrinth is, again, going to be a personal choice. So my vines connected to the actual labyrinth itself, or do you want to create some kind of space that allows the labyrinth to be highlighted on its own there, right? So I might leave a little sort of moat around it. Do I want to leave a space to enter from the base of the page as well? Decision I want to make. Do I, in this moment today, want to pick some symbol that I want to focus on to guide me in my thoughts? So if you did the heart check the other day, my heart check here, you might incorporate your hearts in there because you want this to be a labyrinth page space that helps you to focus and come into the heart. Perhaps you're wanting to connect with nature. If you're wanting to connect with your feminine side, your masculine side, if you're wanting to connect with nature plants, or are you wanting to connect with nature animals? Are you wanting to connect with your imaginative side, and My Little Pony here becomes an inspiration, and the symbols that you might include are imaginary. Is this something that you want to use to ground you in reality, or are you wanting to have it be more spiritual? So all of these choices, your color choices, the choices you make to put in the around your labyrinth need to. I'm going to say need to. They should come from you. They should not be solely based on me. Instinct had me picking up this pink water-soluble crayon this morning, and so that's what I'm going to start with. So some different ways that I'm going to just start with making marks, and I'm going to be creating an abstract background, and I'm going to stop babbling now and start marking with the marks that I am feeling in this moment, which And as you play with your water-soluble tools, you're going to discover what kind of marks create different effects, right? Here I'm using a very linear mark making, very straight out. If you were to lay it down on the side, different type of mark, it's going to respond to the water when we activate it in a very different way. So another thing that is also, in terms of composition, I feel it's a very personal thing, but balance. So balance can be about color proportions, a lot of blue to a little bit of pink. Balance can be the number of times you repeat an object or a shape or a color. Balance can also be about the placement of where they are, right? If everything happens at the top of the page and very little happens at the bottom of the page, there's a certain weight, visual weight, where your eye is going to be drawn, right? So this line in pink has automatically created a certain emphasis, a certain rhythm, and now as the artist in the page, I am going to respond with all my other marks are pretty much responding to that, right? I'm unless I obliterate it, which is a possibility, right? We don't have to keep everything that we put down. And it might not get erased. It might get washed out with the water. It might just sort of be in fade. It might have a color go over top of it that is stronger and overpowers it. So odd and even numbers are also add to balance and rhythm. So as you're marking and thinking about where things go, you may also consider the number. It's still fairly random, but I'm aware of how many are there, right? I left my water in the other room, and I'm going to go dash and grab it while you continue to add marks. So I'm going to start activating And when you're thinking about color, just knowing that your colors, if you're using the water solubles, your colors are going to talk to each other eventually as they connect. And so my pink and my blue are going to connect for purple. A form of purple could be a red violet, it could be a blue violet. But if I were to have yellow on the page, or even green at this time, they would begin to blend more into the browns. So if you don't want it to go brown, stick with colors that are close to each other on the color wheel until the initial layer is dry. So once this layer is dry, if I wanted to add in green or yellow or orange, I would add it once it's dry, so it does not go into mud. Now, if I add plain regular crayon or plain regular colored pencil, these are just basic Prismacolors. If I were to start coloring with that now, that will not bleed in, and so it's not going to mix and blend, and I won't get that effect. So if I'm not worried about that, then I can go, if I don't want to worry about it, I should say, I'm going to go in and do that with some of the regular colored pencils. And again, I can layer over top of this regular colored pencil, but has a little less of a, mixes and blends in a different way. And again, artist choice. Will you put things on the path? Will the entire path be the same? Will the path change? That is a decision you as the artist need to make. again, it's a journal page, not an artwork. And while it can be visually stimulating and you can find it visually beautiful, there's no such thing as ruining it or doing it wrong. And again, if this is something that connects with you, then perhaps there's a series of labyrinths that happen that have different visual and emotional themes, feelings, sensations to them. Again, you can see the difference in how the lines are left when the pigment is picked up from the way I use the tool. So applying the tool on the side versus applying the tool with the point. Applying the watercolor pencil to a dry page versus applying it to an already wet surface, or in this case it's mostly damp. It's going to respond differently to that. Just looking, two different brands, Copenhagen and Ultramarine. Very similar, but so the feel of, again, comes back to the marks and the way the tools feel in your hand. This Derwent watercolor is a lot dry. It's drier as a marking tool. It's more brittle. It's a little bit harder of a quote lead compared to the Prismacolor, which has a very soft feel. It's it's closer to an oil pastel or a crayon almost. So I'm just going to finish this. for right now. I think that this page would benefit from layers. And because it's still damp, it's hard to go into the layers. But I just had the feel of this flowy just needed to be what I used for it today. So I'll probably let it dry for a little while, and then start to add layers to it. Come back in and with some different tools. And I'll leave you today with this liturgy that I had on the page with the Labyrinth in my book. God, who stretched the spangled heavens, infinite in time and place, flung the suns in burning radiance through the silent fields of space. We, your children, in your likeness, share inventive, co-creative power through your spirit. Great Creator, still creating, show us what we may do. May our dreams prove rich with promise, each endeavor well begun. Great Creator, through this experience of shared worship, give us guidance till our goals and yours are one. And perhaps there's a blessing or mantra that you have that might be repeated as you continue to add marks and then meditate on the path, either physically touching the path or exploring it with your eye. Have a great time finding your path.